My name is Dimos Kefalas, and I am a ceramicist. My name is Dimos Kefalas, and I am a Clay Goblin. My name is Dimos Kefalas, and I'm an artist. So I was born in Richmond. I was born at Vancouver Children's Hospital, but I've lived in Richmond my entire life. I love Richmond. It's home. Everything's here. The thing that makes Richmond home for me, I would honestly say, is my family, partner, and friends. And it just makes me feel like, this is where I want to be. Being Greek has been a pretty big part of my life. So it's a pretty big keystone of who I am. My Greek background influences my art, actually, because it's the whole reason why I kind of started. Back in 2018, my family and I went to Greece, just on a family trip. And we saw the newly built Parthenon. I don't know if it was new right then and there, but it was different than we went the last time. And it was just kind of this epiphany moment of how much making meant to me and how much I wanted to be an artist. Especially in my ceramics, I think it really comes through. Even the work that I have in ArtRich, this particular moment, is a Greek form, decorated in a Greek style. So yeah, I would say it's pretty important to my practice and that it comes through, I want to say, clearly. But I started art a bit later in life. I think as kids we always all draw. 2019, I quit my job and decided to go back to art school. And just ever since then, it's been a real centerpiece of my life. Definitely one of the most rewarding, albeit arduous experiences. You put a lot of work into art. Going to school for art was just such a transformative experience. Before going to school for art, I did a couple different things, but none of them really helped me grow as a person as much as being in the arts did. Whether it was, exploring myself as a human being, or just coming to a greater understanding of, how I feel about art. And honestly, what it meant to work really hard toward a goal that you really wanted. Never before going to art would I imagine that I would spend 12 hours at school and still feel energized after it, because you're just doing what you love. I met some of the most amazing people I've ever met, whether they were friends or professors. I did a lot of drawing and painting, and that was what I thought I was going to do. And then I just met Clay, and I was nah, this is it. Clay's great, and I'm just going to stick with it. Process of creating a piece of pottery starts obviously with clay in a wet form, and you can buy clay, you can go find clay. It really depends on what your practice is. I just use store-bought clay. You have to, when you throw in particular, you wedge it. Most clay is wedged regardless, but when we throw, we wedge it in a particular way, usually it's called spiral or ram's head, to get the air bubbles out. You wedge it till you're confident the air bubbles aren't there. You slap it on the wheel, and you throw the form up. It dries, you trim it. In my case, because a lot of my work tends to follow trying to imitate a Greek tradition, usually I'll throw a separate foot, separate lid, and attach them after making the original form. And then, depending on the resources I have available to me, I'll use slip or underglaze to decorate the form in a way that, to me, is reminiscent of Greek pottery. Then you fire it once for bisque, which is just the first firing, just to make sure that the clay isn't quite as delicate when you put it into the second firing, which is your glaze firing, which is what makes it generally that shiny glass-like material. Most of my work is done on a pottery wheel. The pottery wheel is the only thing I think I've consistently used my practice without much deviation. I would say that in my drawing practice, I've started using oil pastels, and that's kind of a medium I've started to fall in love with. So printmaking was a bigger part of my practice back at Langara. It still does show through a little bit. I'm starting to get back into it, particularly silkscreen. Haven't done a lot of like intaglio or lino cut. I would love to get more into it, in particular lino cut, because I think it just meshes really well with ceramics. The act of cutting in and filling in space. But silkscreen, and in particular printmaking and that history of craft, and I think they goes really well with ceramics. So I'm hoping to start integrate that directly into my ceramics practice as opposed to something separate. And most of my art practice is, revolving around my own identity and how I'm trying to figure out, my own place in the world as a Greek queer person, and even just interpreting the way the world is through different stories, because sometimes the world's kind of chaotic and hard to understand, and those small stories, although not reality, I think they bring a lot of people peace, including myself. And I hope that when people look at my work, even if they're not a queer goblin person, they can look at it and be like, hey, there's a story there that relates to my own life somehow. Because I think we all have those feelings of like, I don't really know my place in the world, no matter how we identify, because the world's a big, complicated place, no matter who you are. The piece I have in ArtRich is one of two, so it's a series, and it was an experiment in making narrative work on a form and associating that narrative with something that wasn't traditionally associated to that form. So the form I've made is called lebeskamikos, which is a wedding vase, something that you would give to a bride in ancient Greece to celebrate her union. But the stories I put on them, to me, don't necessarily convey marital love or anything like that. So in my art, a lot of it tends to be coded in the sense of like, there are hints to the story that I believe I'm trying to portray. So like even in the work I have at ArtRich, it's these two hunters in this crab thing. And the hunters are done in an ancient Greek style, and they're both portrayed as like semi-male, in particular the hunter in front. But to me, the way I've drawn the hunters is subverting the notion of, what gets to be male, in particular the kneeling one. In ancient Greek art, depending on the way the eyes are drawn, on pottery, the character is either female or male. And by putting a female eye on one of the male characters, to me, I'm discussing, my own gender identity and how this work helps me deal with, the experience of being a non-binary person, and just what it means to me to, I guess, sort of occupy that position in the world, both as a solitary human being and a Greek person. I think it comes through in, I would say, pretty much all my work. My favorite symbol to use over and over in art is generally a goblin. Like to my Instagram profile. I get called a goblin a lot. That's kind of goblin-like. But I think as queer people, there's I think it might be like a Gen Z thing, Z, where like the goblin has become more associated with queer, but it's also just kind of encapsulated who I am as a person, kind of messy and grungy and gross, kind of chaotic. And I think I've really adopted it as a symbol for myself, both as like, okay, I'm a messy person, I work with clay, but also like the chaos that is kind of inherent in, subverting a system of gender. And is a big reason why I use goblins, because to me it is kind of like this inner character who is like trying to rebel. My name is Dimos Kefalas, and I'm a ceramic artist.